Hello everyone, my name is Derrick Sr. and I'm going to be reading the introduction of my upcoming book called A Father's Love, My Promise to Derrick Jr. This video is approximately 15 to 18 minutes long, so I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get straight to the point. There are three main components to A Father's Love, My Promise to Derrick. The first component is dealing with the trials and tribulations of fatherhood when you are no longer in a relationship with your children's mother or father. The second component is dealing with the loss of a loved one, including your own child. The third component is keeping your faith in God regardless of what you go through or have been through. There's nothing like having that friend that understands because they can relate to what you are going through. My goal for A Father's Love is for it to be that friend that understands and can relate to what you have been through or maybe still going through. I truly believe that we all need a father's love. Now please forgive me and bear with me if I get a little emotional while I'm reading. I was raised in a single home by my mother with my two brothers. I had one older brother and one younger brother. My mother did a remarkable job raising us, considering that she pretty much did it all by herself. When my mother was working, my big brother was our babysitter. There were a couple of times that my mother had to stay in the hospital, and we stayed with our grandparents until she came home. I looked at my grandparents like they were my other mother and father. Neither of our fathers were of any assistance to my mother while we were growing up. My big brother and my grandfather were the two people that I looked up to as my father figures. I didn't actually meet my biological father until just before my 13th birthday. Even after meeting my father, there were a lot of lies and broken promises. Although I loved my father deeply, I had a lot of resentment towards him. I made a vow to myself that when I had children, I would never ever break a promise to them. I never wanted my child to feel the pain and the sadness that I felt from those broken promises. At a young age, I had become accustomed to true heartache and pain. And I believe that this is because when I love, I have always loved hard. July 20th of 1992 is what I had considered to be the worst day of my life. It was the day that my older brother died at the age of 21 when I was 18. I had lost my big brother, who was a father figure to me as well as one of my best friends. I can still remember the day like it was yesterday. Early that morning, my mother received a collect call from the county jail, where my brother had been incarcerated since June 21st of 1992. I remembered her calling my name and telling me to pick the phone up because my brother wanted to talk to me. I was reluctant to pick the phone up because I was upset with my brother for going back to jail. He had been incarcerated a few times before, and I would always accept his calls. I would also take him money and new clothes whenever I visited him. I knew my brother didn't belong in jail, so I wanted him to be as comfortable as possible while he was in there. I picked the phone up and he began telling me that he had just left court. He said that he would be coming home in just 3 days on that Thursday, July 23rd. He said that things were going to be different when he came home. He told me that he was going to stay out of trouble and be the son and big brother that he was supposed to be. It was wonderful to hear him saying these things, and I was so happy that he was coming home. What started as me being reluctant to pick the phone up turned into one of the best conversations that me and my big brother had ever had. Later that evening, after playing basketball in my school summer league, I was home alone listening to music when two police officers came to our door. It was about 8:30 p.m. when I first saw the flashing lights, and then there was a knock on the door. I opened the storm door as I spoke to the officers through the screen door. One of the officers asked me if I was Derrick, and I replied, "How do you know who I am?" Then he asked, "Do you have a brother named Frederick Stewart?" And I said, "Yes. What's going on?" The officer began to explain to me that my brother was lifting weights and playing basketball in their facilities earlier that evening. He said that my brother began complaining that he couldn't breathe and grabbing his chest. He said that several officers tried to help him as they rushed him to the hospital. Then he paused, looked at his partner, then he took a deep breath before looking back at me and said, "Fred left us at approximately 6:05 this evening." With a very confused look on my face, I said, "What do you mean he left you? Where did he go?" The officer put his head down, took another deep breath, then he looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry, son, he passed away." I looked at both officers and said, "Oh, you're wrong, not my brother. I just talked to him this morning and he's coming home on Thursday. You guys are wrong." One of the officers grabbed me in an effort to console me and said, "I'm sorry, son, but we have confirmation that it is Fred." The very first thing that came to my mind was my mother, as I inadvertently said, "Oh no, Mama's not gonna like this." As much as it hurt me that my brother passed away, I felt a great sense of sympathy for my mother because I knew that she loved us to death. I felt as though someone had cut out half my heart with a very, very dull butter knife, then taken it and hidden it someplace that I would never be able to find it again, leaving me with the badly butchered remains. I loved my big brother dearly, and I knew that he loved me as well, but I cannot remember ever saying "I love you" to each other. This may be the one thing that I can say I regret in life. Little did I know that my life would be filled with dates that would bring me great joy, as well as dates that brought me horrible pain. When I was 19, my mother got remarried to a man that loved and cherished her very much. I grew to love him and I became comfortable calling him Dad because of the way that he loved my mother. I was happy for her because I knew she was happy. At the beginning of 2000, my mother purchased a large house that had enough space to accommodate her, my stepfather, my grandfather, and my grandmother. Both my grandparents had grown old and were very sick, and my stepfather was battling cancer. Just 2 months after moving into the house, my grandfather passed away. On December 8, 2004, my stepfather passed away. On November 25, 2006, my grandmother joined her husband of 64 years in heaven. These were all dates that saddened me deeply because of the love and respect that I had for all three of them. Then came September 18, 1994. This was the first of the most joyful days of my life. It was the day that my firstborn child, Derrick Jr., was born. This is also the day that I had to report to Atlanta, Georgia for my basketball scholarship. I only got to spend about 30 minutes with little Derrick before I had to leave to go to the airport. I got a chance to clean him, hold him, and give him one more kiss before I had to leave. And there he lay, crying with his arms and legs kicking and flailing. As I leaned over to give my little man a kiss on his chest, he wrapped both his hands and both of his feet, both his legs around my entire head. You could hear his cry calm down considerably as he held on to me. I then heard one of the nurses say, "Oh my God, did you see that?" Then one of the nurses began to unclamp his hands and his feet from around my head. That moment would forever define our bond. Unbreakable. I sadly but proudly began to exit the hospital as I made my way to the airport. My mother drove me to the airport, and on the way there, I remembered her telling me two things. She said, "Always keep God first, son." Secondly, she said, "When times get hard for you, just remember all that you do, you are doing for your son now." I gave my mother a hug and I told her that I loved her as I proceeded to catch my flight. One thing I remember about that day is that I just could not stop smiling and thinking about that little fella. As the days would pass, he would be all that I could think about. Little Derrick was on my mind while I worked out, while I studied, while I practiced, and even as I slept. Little Derrick would be the driving force that propelled me into becoming my team's second leading scorer. A few weeks had passed, and I remembered coming back to my room after basketball practice on a Thursday evening. I called back home to check on my son's mother and my little man, but there was no answer. Over the next couple of hours, I continued to call, but there still would be no answer. Later on that evening, I would finally get a phone call from my mother. She was calling to tell me that little Derrick's grandmother had put him and his mother out of her house along with all of their belongings. My mother then proceeded to let me know that little Derrick also had pneumonia. I sat there on the phone silently. Then my mother said, "Derrick, are you there?" I replied, "Yeah, Mom, I'm here. I'm just thinking." Then she said, "There's nothing to think about, son. Don't you worry about little Derrick. I will make sure that he's taken care of. You just stay focused on doing what you gotta do, because you being there is taking care of little Derrick." I said, "I know, Mama, I understand." I went to school on Friday and continued to practice through the weekend. Not only was my attention not on my studies, but it wasn't on basketball either. That following Monday morning at approximately 11:30 a.m., I walked through my mother's front door with all of my bags. I walked in the family room where my mother, little Derrick, and his mother were. My mother looked up at me with a smile on her face and said, "What are you doing here?" As I leaned over to pick my son up, to hug him, to kiss him, and just hold him, I replied to my mother, "The other day you said that there was nothing to think about, and you're absolutely right about that." Excuse me. Because he's my son, and I will take care of him. There will be other scholarships. I wanted to be the person that gave little Derrick the love and attention that he needed. There was no way I was going to sit back and let my mother take care of my responsibilities while I was away playing basketball and living out my dream. I never could understand how a man could father a child and run off and leave his responsibilities to grow without him. I was taught that once you have a child, your life is no longer yours because it now belongs to that child. I just couldn't bear the thought of missing little Derrick's first crawl, his first words, or his first steps. It was my duty to love this little fella with no regrets, and that's exactly what I did. Once I came back home, I was able to get my job back as a barber, but I only worked part-time because I became little Derrick's sole caregiver while his mother worked. Although parenthood was new to the both of us, we did a good job in providing a comfortable life for our little fella. I would normally work in the evenings while she would stay at home with little Derrick. Work in the mornings while she would stay at home with little Derrick. Then I would come home to be with him so she could work the second shift. This would be our routine for months until she lost her job. At that point, I began to work full-time to provide for the three of us. Playing basketball had been the one thing that I had always taken the most serious until I was introduced to fatherhood. I took great pride and joy in being a father. That bond that little Derrick and I shared made it that much sweeter. When little Derrick was 5 months old, he had to have hernia surgery. The surgery took no longer than an hour, but I was on pins and needles every second of the operation. I remember when the surgery was finally over, the doctor came out to tell us that the surgery was a success. He told us that we could see him as we walked into the room, and the nurse was holding little Derrick as he cried uncontrollably. Upon seeing his mother and I, he began to cry even harder. At that point, the nurse reached little Derrick to his mother, and he continued to cry. Derrick looked over his mother's shoulder, staring directly at me as I picked him up and held him close to me. You could hear his cry stop almost instantly as he lay there snuggling his head against my chest, trying to go to sleep. The nurse said, "Oh, that is so cute. He wanted his dad." As I said, our bond would forever be unbreakable. Less than a year later, we found out that we were expecting another child. When little Derrick was 20 months old, his mother and I welcomed our new addition to the family. On May 20th, 1996, Darius D. Duff, my second son, was born. Nothing in the world gave me greater joy than being a father, and now I'm the father of two healthy and beautiful boys. My boys and I were inseparable. The boys' mother and I worked hard on keeping our relationship and family together. We had an off and on relationship that came to an end in 1999. I had a hard time seeing my boys whenever their mother and I disagreed in the past. I had no idea of the hell that I would experience trying to see my boys once we separated for good. So once again, like I said, the name of the book is called A Father's Love, My Promise to Derrick. And the reason I added My Promise to Derrick to it is because I made my son, Derrick Duff Jr., a promise on August 23rd, 2012, that I would tell the world our story. Derrick wanted the world to know our story because he didn't want other children or parents to go through what we went through. With that being said, I need your help in keeping that promise. I will be releasing the book on March 30th, 2016, and I need at least 500 people to pre-order their copies of the book before January 1st of 2016. This gives me exactly 1 month to raise the money needed for the editing and printing of the books. Once we have reached our goal and the books have been printed, I will personally sign and ship your books to you. The first 500 people to pre-order their books before January 1st of 2016 will also receive their books well before the release date of March 30th, 2016. This also means that you won't have to wait to read our phenomenal story along with most of the world once it's released. Paperback copies of the book will be $19.95 plus shipping, and the hard copies are $29.95 plus shipping. So please, go to our website, which is dadsagainstdaddyabuse.com, and pre-order your copies today. You can also order the Dad t-shirts through the website, dadsagainstdaddyabuse.com. The t-shirt just like I'm wearing now. And Dad stands for Dads Against Daddy Abuse. This is an organization that I started to bring awareness to the abuse of deserving fathers' rights. This movement is not about the fathers. Our focus is the children. Like our slogan says, daddy abuse is a form of child abuse because it is the child that gets hurt in the end. I'm asking you and everyone to please share this video to help make it go viral so we can bring awareness to this overdue issue once and for all. I will be doing another reading of a different part of the book on Monday, February 1st of 2016, so I hope you stay tuned, and I truly thank you all for all of your support. You can follow me on Facebook at Derrick Sr., that's DerrickSr. Once again, I thank you.